Welcome, and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. Today we're going to help people explore one of the most loving relationships a person may have by the time they approach midlife. But this also includes pretty much all ages in between, and that is the relationship that we have with our pets. There are a lot of things that we enjoy doing when it comes to our pets, like spoiling them, taking them for walks, letting them lay in our laps, you name it. Sometimes some of them can seem a little skittish, especially if you happen to be one of those who go out and find one at a shelter and adopt it. They seem a little nervous or a little edgy. What do you do to be able to get them to calm down? Joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today is someone who's going to be talking about a thing called TTouch. It's the ability to be able to apply a way that you can connect and communicate with your animal from deep within. I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today our guest, Ms. Lauren McCall. Lauren, thank you for joining us here on the program.
It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for having me.
Now, tell us how this started for you here.
Well, TTouch itself has been around for quite some time. It's something that was started by a woman named Linda Tellington Jones in the 1970s. And she started using this technique, which I'm sure we'll describe in some detail as we go along. Started using it on horses, dealing with health and behavior issues. And I guess, to be honest, it was a bit of an intuitive development for her in its initial stages. In other words, you got to get the idea from somewhere, right? But I was brought into this work because I inherited a dog when my dad died, if inherited is the right word, who was 10 years old, a Malamute, and she had been the friendliest dog ever her entire life. But as she got older, about the time she came into our home, she started to develop arthritis. She got sore. And as many of your listeners will know, as your animals age and as we age a bit, and our body gets creaky, animals, dogs, cats, they can be a little defensive, when the dog is used to like other dogs, but now they're a little bit snappish or they avoid them. I really noticed behavior changes in this Malamute, Rue. And a friend of mine told me about TTouch, and TTouch, which is short for Tellington Touch. And it's a method that's it looks kind of like massage, but actually it's quite different. It's to a large degree, it's a hands-on technique. It's very fun and easy to learn. It also involves some movement and groundwork kind of exercises, which we can talk about if you like. But the long and short of it is that I called up a local instructor. Her name is Debbie Potts. She's now my business partner. And she came over to my house and showed me this very simple technique that I could use to work on my own dog, and it would help to reduce the swelling and inflammation that was caused by the arthritis, and therefore hopefully not only make her feel more comfortable, which is the main thing, but make her less reactive to other dogs.
Oh, interesting.
Well,
and obviously a much happier animal to boot.
A much happier animal, Daniel, and of course she was coming into our home, and it was also a really nice way for me to work with her, you know what I mean, in a very personal, hands-on kind of way. We developed a really nice bond. But the results of this thing, quite frankly, were miraculous. In 3 weeks, her behavior completely changed. She was fine with all other dogs. She didn't lunge and bark at them anymore. I didn't have to put her on any medication for arthritis for another 4 years. And
wow.
Oh yeah, it was quite remarkable, actually. And you know what, Daniel? It was so effective. I was a marketing director. I've got a business background. I was a marketing director for a company in Portland at the time, and I immediately went part-time in my work, and I signed up to be a Tellington Touch practitioner. I was that impressed with it. It completely changed my life.
Isn't it fascinating, Lauren, that, in a day and an age where we have so much information available to us, that we tend to take the road most traveled, the quickest, the fastest, the easiest, and it really never leads us, to the results that we really want to have, the real profound change that we're seeking. And then something like, for instance, this TTouch surfaces and gives us more than we could have ever imagined, and we wonder, why was this needle buried not only in the haystack, but the haystack was hidden as well?
It's true. You know what? You're absolutely right. And you know what else is interesting, Daniel, to just build on what you're saying? You know, technology. We have become, in many ways, I think, so incredibly reliant upon technology, especially for health stuff.
Right.
And you know, this TTouch stuff, it's really simple, and you know, we use our hands, and that's all that's required. And you don't need a degree in anatomy. You don't even need to know anatomy. In other words, there isn't a huge amount of intellectualization or study involved. It's just a really simple, positive technique. And yeah, why is this buried under a haystack? Why doesn't everybody know about this?
Mm-hmm. Well, the other thing, too, that you're also saying as well is that we've lost our ability to become intuitive, which is what we are by nature. And as a result, we start looking outside for answers that inherently we really already know as it is. We tend to surrender, you know, our knowledge to somebody that we believe, well, they know more than I do because they're educated, for instance, doctors, you know.
Right.
We tend to kind of relinquish that power. Well, they know better than I do, and some of them will send you on a road, and maybe they mean well, who knows, down a road that makes you a lot worse off than you were to begin with.
You're absolutely right. And don't you sometimes have the feeling, Daniel, that maybe a healthcare practitioner has told you something, and intuitively you feel it's wrong, and yet you defer to them anyway?
Right. You know, well, for instance, you know, I've got this tremendous pain in my knee, and they may say, well, step in front of a moving truck. You know, and you think, okay,
yeah,
you know.
Right. Yeah.
I guess if the rest of my body hurts, the knee pain won't seem as bad. I guess that's the intention here.
It's the lesser of the evils, isn't it?
Now, let's talk about TTouch, what it actually is. I know you've kind of touched on the surface of it, but what is it exactly?
Yeah, okay. It is, there are a couple of different aspects to it. The most commonly known is what we call the body work part. And it's quite simple. It's really using your fingers or your hand to lightly push the skin in a clockwise circle and a quarter. And I know that sounds sort of silly and maybe a bit woo-woo. It's not energy work. I personally don't have a problem with energy work, but that's not what this is.
Mm-hmm.
There was a study done with TTouch at the Boulder Biofeedback Institute a number of years ago, and this carries forward into explaining what this is. They hooked up dogs, horses, and people to a machine called a mind mirror, which measures brainwave patterns.
Okay.
You know, we've got 4 primary brainwave patterns. And they did a lot of different hands-on techniques. For example, the person did massage on the horse or the dog, or they did, you know, different kinds of massage and different kinds of techniques. They did energy work and all different kinds of things. And they also did this TTouch clockwise circle and a quarter moving of the skin. Now, I mean literally moving the skin as opposed to sliding on the top or rubbing the skin. I'm actually moving the tissue of the skin very lightly in that pattern. And you know what was interesting? They found that when they did the clockwise circle and a quarter pattern, the TTouch circle we call it, all 4 brainwave patterns were engaged.
Wow.
Interesting. Not only in the horse and the dog that were receiving it, but I'll tell you what's so cool. Also in the person who was doing it. So it's mutually beneficial.
Wow, that's interesting.
It is interesting. And when they did other different kinds of things, like various types of massage, and believe me, I'm not criticizing massage. I'm merely expressing that this is a slightly different kind of thing.
Sure.
They found that at least one of the brainwave patterns was dropped. So TTouch is working on a very deep level. And what it does is it works on a cellular level, and it stimulates the use of new neural pathways. And this really differentiates it from massage. And again, I don't have a problem with massage at all. But the benefits of TTouch can be very, very long-lasting. And it has a lot of implications for use in health and behavior issues. And if you'd like, I can go into that a bit.
Well, yeah, what you're saying, Lauren, makes a lot of sense because we live in a day and an age where we're usually in one of two brain states, but the most dominant one is always beta.
Exactly.
We're always in that, especially in America, they demand that you're hyper-focused, you're micromanaging, and all of these things. We actually had a wonderful guest who developed what was called open focus, which helps to bring people out of this beta state more regularly because we're really not wired to be that way. And when you talk about a T-touch that engages all four brainwave states, most people have never even experienced what it's like to be in theta. Alpha you do because you sit in front of the television so much or play around with your little iPhone, a little too much, but even that keeps you in a perpetual beta state as well. But you can see why people are so nervous or, wound up.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And
then the animals become that way naturally.
Well, they do. And we're so used to getting stimulus, aren't we, Daniel?
Right.
We get it from everywhere. Mm-hmm. And, we say that T-touch is a form of nonverbal communication because it's another way to connect with your animal. It's another way to be with your animal that's not really necessarily in that beta state at all that you're talking about. We're talking about touching them, engaging with them, using your intuition to allow your intuition to guide where your hands go on their body. You may be noticing hot or cold spots on their body or places where they're sensitive to being touched. Maybe, I don't know about you, Daniel, I personally carry a lot of my tension in my back. And a lot of people like back massage, to be honest. For me, it's kind of painful. I'm a little bit sensitive there because that's where all the muscles are tight. And our animals have these tension patterns as well. They carry tension naturally in their body just like we do. If you're alive, you have tension. It doesn't mean their life is hard or horrible, but we all have tension, either because we're compensating for an imbalance physically in our body, or maybe there's stuff going on. Maybe your dog has a fear of loud noises and it's around the 4th of July. Whatever it may be. Mm-hmm. We've all got stuff going on. But this is just a nice way to be with them on a really different kind of a level and do yourself both some good by doing T-touch.
Yeah, I could hear how it would have benefits for both people, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, I noticed I was on your website that you actually, because one of the things a listener might wonder, well, is this just good for dogs, good for cats? But, we could even, I was noticing you had rabbits on here as well. What about parakeets, things like that? I mean, is this good for all kinds of animals?
Yeah, it is. It is. It's good for anything with a nervous system, and that includes people.
And even rattlesnakes.
And even rattlesnakes.
How about that?
I've done T-touch on literally elephants and tigers, bugs, squirrels, rabbits, guinea pigs,
a regular Dr. Doolittle.
The whole thing, and it's remarkably effective for all kinds of things. And I'll tell you what works best for my back. And I'm over 50, and I've got some disc degeneration. And the only thing that really works for me long term is when my business partner Debbie Potts does T-touch on my back. Mm-hmm. It's amazing. So works for everybody.
So as you've been doing this within the community, I understand that you're in Portland, Oregon. How has, I guess, the community, what has the response been with this, with people?
We've been doing T-touch around here for, a long time. And it's been very well received in the community in a lot of different ways. Specifically, the Oregon Humane Society, which I have a tremendous amount of respect for, what a fantastic organization. Mm-hmm. They regularly have we have some practitioners, T-touch practitioners, who've gone through our 2-year training program in the Portland area, and there are a couple of them, Susan Davis and Don Jansen, who regularly do T-touch classes for the volunteers. The volunteers come to learn T-touch for the shelter animals, working with those animals, helping them to be, less stressed. Because if you've got a dog or a cat or a rabbit who are up at the front of the cage engaging with people when they come to look at them, they are far more likely to be adopted than those animals that are hiding under the blanket at the back of the cage.
Oh, yeah.
And we do a lot of our practitioner trainings all over the world, and we do TTouch in 26 different countries, by the way. We do a lot of practitioner trainings at animal shelters, partly, of course, because it's a wonderful experience for the practitioners in training. They have a chance to work with a lot of different kinds of animals who are having a lot of issues, usually fear and stress. But the other thing that's so fabulous, Daniel, is that whenever we leave the shelter after our 6-day trainings, the adoption rates go up, because those animals that we've worked with over the week really change.
Wow.
It's terrific. And it also helps with the return rate, which is very low. You know, part of it is getting the animal adopted, but they also have to be well-adjusted enough and flexible and, how shall we say, able to roll with the punches.
Right.
So that they can stay in their new home, in their new environment. And if an animal's been at a shelter for a while, that's a tough transition too sometimes.
You know, Lauren, there's an interesting thing to talk about, because people usually have an earnestness when it comes to adopting an animal, but you mentioned return rate. What does that usually look like?
Well, and it varies a lot from shelter to shelter, and there are a lot of different factors that will impact that kind of thing. One of the big things, Daniel, to be perfectly honest, you take somewhere like the Oregon Humane Society that's got an overall adoption rate of about 97%. Well, this is a phenomenal adoption rate. And one of the other great things about OHS is that animals generally don't stay in the shelter very long. In other words, we have so much support from the community. They go in there. When they think about, I want to get a dog or a cat or whatever, they think about OHS or Bonnie Hayes or, some of the other public shelters. So we have a quick return rate. But in a lot of parts of the world, and I travel all over the world, visiting shelters and working in shelters, and even a lot of parts of the United States, that's not the case. Mm-hmm. So you get an animal like a dog or a cat, let's just take them for easy examples, who are in a shelter for a long time. Shelters are noisy. There are a lot of other animals. There's a lot of smells. There's a lot of people coming through. It's not a big stretch of the imagination to understand why these guys would get stressed. Mm-hmm. It's not a normal lifestyle. The dogs may get out and get walked once or twice a day, maybe, depending on the shelter. They're peeing and pooping on concrete. It's not a normal situation for them. And so what happens very quickly, and not frankly just with shelter animals, but a lot of your listeners at home have got dogs or cats that are reactive to things. Maybe they start to get noise sensitive, or maybe they're reactive to other animals. Mm-hmm. This is scary, or maybe they start to get frightened of children who move erratically or make funny noises. And once you start to get these sensitivities, a reactivity to something, unfortunately, like with people, this stuff becomes habitual very quickly. Let's say, for example, a dog's been in the shelter for a while, okay? And a nice person comes and adopts the dog, takes him or her home, takes the dog for a walk, and the dog sees another dog, right?
Right.
Lunges and barks, and the person's thinking, what the heck's going on here? What's up with this? I thought this was a nice dog that I adopted. It's possible that being around all those other dogs in the shelter has really made it afraid of the noise of other dogs. There's a lot of barking in shelters. Mm-hmm. There's some very funny associations that go on there. Or maybe you've got a dog at home that you didn't adopt. Maybe it's a dog you got from a breeder, and they're also reactive to other dogs. Usually dogs lunge and bark because it's fear. It's not because they're aggressive. It's usually I'm going to bark like crazy so you keep the heck away from me. Mm-hmm. What happens is it's called a stimulus response mechanism. Dog sees other dog. A well-worn set of neural pathways is triggered, and you get the same response, the lunging and barking. Dog sees child, barks. My cat, she was semi-feral when we adopted her, and she's come a long way. But if somebody rings the doorbell, she hears that sound, she runs under the bed. So in order to change these kind of behaviors, in order to help these animals to be able to think and act rather than just be reactive, is something that TTouch is really good for, because as I mentioned, it stimulates the use of new neural pathways. In other words, rather than having that same superhighway neural pathway of I see child, I bark, it gives them a chance to try something different. There's a child. Let me think about whether or not that child is really scary or a threat to me, and then I'll think about how to respond. You see what I mean?
Yeah, it makes me think about, sometimes why dogs bark, especially they say you're more likely to be bitten by a smaller dog than a larger one, and they say it's generally because smaller dogs tend to be more high-strung. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I kind of know what you mean by that, and I think I agree. I think that that's part of it. Certainly some smaller dogs, gosh, we can think of a lot of small terrier breeds that might sure fit into that category. I think there's some other things that come into play, though, Daniel. If you think about how people interact with smaller dogs as opposed to how we interact with larger dogs. Let me give you an example. You got a larger dog who's maybe not the most confident dog on the planet, maybe a little unsure of things. Whatever it is, it doesn't make any difference. What you do with that bigger dog is you reassure them, you help them to stand in their own balance. Maybe you say, it's okay, everything's fine. We'll back up. We'll move away from the car that you're afraid of. We'll sit down. We'll think about it. What people with smaller dogs often do is rather than try to help the animal cope with the situation, rather than help the animal develop their own coping skills, develop their own confidence, a lot of times what people do with the best intentions in the world is if a smaller animal is afraid, they pick them up.
Ah.
Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with picking up your dog, good heavens. But if you think about it, basically what you're saying is, you don't have to deal with this. You don't have to learn to cope with this. They don't get a lot of coping skills.
Ah.
I bark, I whine, I'm afraid, Mom or Dad picks me up. Problem solved.
Yeah, but we wouldn't do that with our own children.
Precisely. Exactly. You've hit the nail on the head, Daniel.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly right. So they don't develop the coping skills that I think they're very capable of developing.
Fascinating. And you can see how now TTouch is one of these things that you can even provide on the spot.
Yep.
Perhaps? Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And as I said, it's something that anybody can learn how to do. It's really quick and easy, and it's fun. And it's something that once you know it, you can apply it to a lot of different things. We've talked quite a bit about behavior stuff. How about health stuff? How about that Malamute, who was having behavior issues, but also real health issues from the arthritis.
Mm-hmm.
TTouch works with the cells. It helps reduce swelling and inflammation. It's really good for post-surgical stuff, for recovery from that kind of thing. It helps the healing process. We get a lot of referrals from veterinarians in Portland. We work with a lot of vet clinics. I get referrals from neurologists, post-laminectomy, back surgery stuff to help, expedite the healing process. So it really works very well in conjunction with veterinary care. TTouch is never a substitute, but we feel that it really works hand in hand with it. And there's another component that I think you'll understand very well. If you have an animal who's not well, maybe you take them to the vet. That's the appropriate thing to do. But there are times when we feel powerless. You don't feel like you're really participating in your animal's wellness. Maybe you're giving them a pill or whatever it is you're doing. But at least with TTouch, you're really participating. It may be that you still need to give them the medication by all means, but just working with them helps you feel like you're not just watching and waiting for the result. You can get in there, work with the animal, help them to feel better. You can have a real positive effect in your animal's wellness.
And you're talking about something that not only can you do at home, but it's a non-invasive treatment that really doesn't have any negative side effects, I would imagine.
Actually, it's true.
Okay.
It's really true. You cannot do any harm with TTouch. If you do it upside down and backwards, The worst that'll happen is that you'll spend some quality time with your animal.
And the best thing is you'll discover you had a new talent. You can do something upside down and backwards.
Hey.
Now, your website is the Integrated Animal, and I noticed that it's quite extensive for information. Tell us about that.
You know, we really wanted to provide a resource on our website where people could dip in, have a look, and find out in general, what is TTouch? You know, who is it good for? Why does this apply to cats and dogs? Why is this good for rabbits and horses? We even have a page talking about how TTouch can be applied for you as a human. So, you know, promoting our services is one thing, but just being a resource for people to learn about TTouch is another. And we think that's really important because, you know, as far as we're concerned, we're very blessed. We're very lucky. Both Debbie Potts and myself. We're busy. We travel the world teaching TTouch. I'm leaving for Japan on Friday to go and teach in the TTouch practitioner training program we have operating in Japan. But we want to be a resource for people who are local too. You know, and it's not all about gathering work for ourselves. It's about spreading the word, connecting you with other local practitioners. It doesn't have to be all about us, but just come, learn about it, have a good time.
Right. Very good. And people, there's also a newsletter that you put out as well that they can sign up absolutely free on your website?
There's a newsletter. They can sign up for free. And we are, as a matter of fact, our schedules are, it's kind of unusual. Debbie and I get to teach together in Portland, but we're actually offering a TTouch for Dogs workshop in Portland, December 1st and 2nd in Southeast Portland.
Okay, great. We'll be sure to put that on our website as well.
Yes, thank you.
Fantastic. So go ahead, Lauren, and give out your website again so people can find out more about this.
Okay, it's www.integratedanimal.com.
TheIntegratedAnimal.com. And just to remind everybody, you can do this on pretty much any of your pets, all animals. Just don't go out in the woods and do it experimentally with something like a Nile crocodile, for instance.
Fortunately, we don't have too many of those in the Willamette.
Very good. Well, Laura McCall, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program. It's encouraging to always know those neat things that empower us to be able to do something that inherently we really already know how to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Very good. Well, thank you again for being on the program today.
It's been a pleasure, Daniel. Thank you so much, and thank you for everyone who's listening today.
You bet. Hold tight. The Integrated Animal is the website. We'll be sure to have a hot link on beyond50radio.blogspot.com should you happen to go by and visit that. And be sure to sign up for our free weekly updates as well. Thank you again for tuning in. This is the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis, and remember, live your day past halfway.